Hello guys, welcome back to another video. Today I'll be taking a look at the winter storm that was affecting the whole tri-state on New Year's Day, leaving the country as another storm is going to come down from the south and become a coastal low and form off the coast. For that storm, you have winter weather advisories stretching all the way back from Pennsylvania all the way back just north of Boston and into Massachusetts. From the New Year's Day snowstorm, you still have winter storm warnings and advisories for parts of Maine because it is still snowing currently up in that area. As you make your way back towards the Midwest and Ohio Valley, you have dense fog advisories because you have all that cold air and snow on the ground, and you have warm air trying to intrude in that area as the low pressure system down here is going to drag the cold front down into here, and warm air is going to be allowed to come up into that area. If we take a look at the GFS right here, we have the eastern view of the U.S. setting up. You see you have your low pressure system already starting to form on your coastal boundary that is set up right across along the coast, and it's going to form with this little piece of energy diving down, and it could merge into a snowstorm. Now the models have backed off on the intensity of this storm due to the less vigorous low pressure system up here and combining. This low pressure system once again has been trending weaker and weaker, and also the track of the system has been trending more south and east. So that means areas in northern New York and northern Vermont and New Hampshire may not see much snow out of this. Maybe a general 1 to 3, maybe a coating 1 to inch, a coating to an inch or two. Now, if we continue here, you can see by 7 p.m. on Monday, you can see that the snow is starting to expand through upstate New York, northern parts of Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, and Connecticut here. And if you go to 1 a.m. Tuesday, you could see that, well, excuse me, 1 a.m. Monday, 7 p.m. Sunday, that's what it was before. It is still snowing across upstate New York, west and central parts of Connecticut and Massachusetts, and into southern New Hampshire and Vermont. Now, with this system, once it gets into the Gulf of Maine, it looks like it's going to bomb out. Bomb out means when the millibars drop very quickly, so that means the storm is intensifying very quickly. So it looks like eastern and central most parts of Maine could see a couple more inches of snow out of this. This could be several inches in fact, which could lead to a major snowstorm for that part of the area. And by next week, we could have another winter storm here. Depending on the track of the system and depending how quick this low pressure leaves, we could have another snowstorm for coastal areas, depending how cold it gets. Now, let's say it tracks like this, you wouldn't see that much snow, maybe just rain at parts of the coast here because it's too far offshore. But if we take a look at the Canadian, you can see that actually does have a decent sized snowstorm for parts of coastal Long Island, New Jersey, and parts even into Washington, D.C. Just looking at the Canadian here, it looks like Winter Storm Jonas at most because you're fighting that cold air that's to the north. It's so hard to get into Boston. It's a heavy snowfall down into Washington, D.C., and that's pretty much looks like Winter Storm Jonas at least from the Canadians run. If we go back to today's stand front, you can see it's still snowing in Maine, and Canadian wants to be a little more intense with this storm, causing heavier snowfall for parts of central and northern Pennsylvania into northern New Jersey, Connecticut, western Massachusetts, and all the way up into all the way in the border of Canada and New York. The Canadian is a bit colder with this model run, so you can see this rain and snow line is just north, if not right over New York City, and the Giants could be playing in snow tomorrow, which is a pretty cool thing to understand. And Buffalo, the Bills are playing at their home stadium, which they could see some snow as well. Now, if we take a look again, it really does depend how quick this storm system leaves. If this stays here, this would suppress the storm south and leave a storm for the Virginias and South and North Carolina. But if the storm system does get out of the way, like the Canadian does show here, you can see the storm does actually in fact form, and it does create a coastal system causing snowfall for southern Massachusetts, southern Connecticut, Long Island, New Jersey, almost all of New Jersey it looks like, Maryland, Delaware, and even into Virginia. Now if we look at the snow totals from that system that is going to be impacting the eastern part of the U.S. tomorrow, you can see it gives a 1 to 3 inches generally, but it does give pockets of 3 to 5, and up in Maine it looks like to be the jackpot here. But if you go into Next week's system, by Friday, you can see it does drop several inches for coastal parts of New Jersey, Maryland, parts of Long Island, and southern Massachusetts. But then again, if we go back to GFS, it doesn't show a system. It just shows rain pretty much for the coastal parts, and that's pretty much it. But this is the storm that's going to be happening Sunday into Monday. You can see, once again, a general 1 to 3, but you do have pockets of 3 to 5 back into Pennsylvania, New York, and then your sweet spot's going to be central and eastern parts of Maine here. If we take a look at the NAM, right now, at 2 p.m. at least, you can see that it's still snowing pretty heavily in parts of Maine and even into Nova Scotia. But if you go to now, what is around 5 o'clock, it is just starting to leave into Maine. But if you take a look into the south, you can see your storm is starting to form just off the coast of North Carolina at 8 a.m. Sunday. And if we go a little farther, you can see the storm starts to form and starts pretty snowing parts, maybe even heavily at times in parts of central and parts of southern New York here. Not just quite on Long Island, it's a little too warm. But as you continue, for some reason, the NAM wants to completely give up on the precip here and then eventually move out and give Maine a pretty heavy dumping of snow here. If we go to total snowfall, you can see the snow line is just north, if not right over New York City here. Boston doesn't really get snow out of this. It's all going to be rain. But anywhere north of this line here, pretty much, it's going to be all snow. And again, once again, central and eastern parts of Maine is going to be the jackpot of this system. If you go onto the NAM 3K, it's not fully out for Maine, but you can see once again central New York and central and western parts of Pennsylvania, 1 to 3, pockets of 3 to 5. And if you go to the RGM here, it actually does get snowed down into Long Island, at least onto western parts of Long Island. It does in fact also get snowed down into the Boston metro, and your heaviest snowfall looks to be just north of New York City into central and southern Connecticut. Right now we have the European up, and if we take a look, you can see it's still snowing at least by 1 p.m. and now it's 5 o'clock, so it's pretty much almost done there. But if we continue all the way into tomorrow, you can see back by now it's a little bit colder, having snow all the way down into Boston and even down into Nassau County, Suffolk County of Long Island here. This is your rain and snow line, so I would suspect that maybe starts at snow there. This low pressure system is a little bit more intense and it brings down cold air up here from Canada. So at least on the European's view, it wants to be colder, and your heaviest snowfall is back from eastern parts of Pennsylvania, central and parts of southern parts of New York, northern New Jersey, Connecticut, most northern parts of Rhode Island, and western and central Massachusetts. If we continue here with the European, you can see that the European actually wants to continue this system out towards the east instead of pretty much northeast, excuse me for that, but it still has a mix over Long Island here, which is quite interesting, and Boston does eventually change over the snow, and it does bomb out the storm in Gulf of Maine, but when it does bring the system for Friday, it does have it off the coast. So this is pretty much the Europeans' view. This is, I guess you could put the GFS here, and then the Canadians right here. The Canadian does give snowfall for this area. The GFS does have precip for that area, but it's pretty much all rain, and then the European has no precip whatsoever. It really all depends on how the system for Sunday gets out here. Does it get out of here fast, causing this system to be able to track up here and give the coastal parts of the U.S. here a decent sized snowfall, or does it stay here for a while, at least until the day of the storm, and suppress the storm down here, giving most southern parts of the area a snowstorm? As of right now, the models really don't know, and we will have to wait until at least the midweek to get a good understanding of where that low pressure is going to go, but it's all in the models here. This is my pretty much final forecast for the storm that's going to be happening Sunday into Monday. Along the coast, it will pretty much be all rain all the way from Boston, New York, all the way down into Washington, Baltimore, New Jersey, into Philadelphia. But there could be few flakes mixing in maybe at the start and maybe at the finish as well as the cold air wraps back around. And this 1 to 3, which is generally all the way from Pennsylvania up to Maine, that's 1 to 3 inches. In the darker blue, 3 to 5, that's from central Pennsylvania into central and southern parts of New York, just into Albany. Albany, I could see 2 to 3, maybe 4, depending how heavy the snow gets. But once the low pressure system tracks into the Gulf of Maine, it's going to stick here for a couple of days and maybe even intensify. So I really do think 3 to 5 in central Maine, and then once you get closer to the coast and eastern parts of Maine, you could see 5 to 8, depending how strong the storm gets. I hope everybody has a great day and stay safe.